Look, we're looking to sweep you guys. You wanted us. You were crying out that you bypassed the harder team in Miami Heat.
Rose came down bad on his left foot. See him holding on to his knee, and down. He was flying, and he came down wrong on the left foot. Now, whether it was an ankle or a knee, I do not know.
The Chicago Bulls were a team that had so much potential, and then one day everything collapsed, and they struggled for a little while, but now they're one of the top teams in the NBA currently as we speak. Yo, what's good? We back with a brand new video, a new style of a video, and we're going to be talking about the Chicago Bulls' rise back to elite NBA company. Let's get it going. Timeline, let's go. 2011-2012, the Chicago Bulls were led by reigning MVP, fourth-year superstar Derrick Rose, and were proving that they were going to be a problem even though it was a lockout season and it started in Christmas, but the Chicago Bulls did win 50 games in a 66-game season, with them going 50-16. Head coach Tom Thibodeau proved he was one of the elite coaches in the game, and the team was elite with vets like Richard Hamilton, Carlos Boozer, Luol Deng, and also had their fair share of young players like Joakim Noah, Derrick Rose, Taj Gibson, and a young Jimmy Butler who wasn't even close to who he is now. This team was the best team in the NBA, but obviously had competition with the super team Miami Heat, led by LeBron James. But unfortunately for the Chicago Bulls, they lost in the first round to the Sixers in a 1-8 matchup, but that wasn't even the main story. It was the loss of Derrick Rose in Game 1 of that series in the fourth quarter, with them winning with only about a minute left in the game, tore his ACL that would keep him out for the next season also, and this was the start of the downfall of the Chicago Bulls. Now heading into the next season, they were now without Derrick Rose and had picked up some new faces like a reliable veteran, Nate Robinson, who was now the replacement for Rose, and Marco Beninelli, who was a three-point specialist, but pretty much they kept the same roster from last season that won 50 games, which is understandable. But without Rose, the offense took a step back, being one of the lowest scoring teams in the league that season. And though the defense was still top 3 in the NBA with this being a Tibbs team, I think you would expect that. The Bulls actually went farther than the previous season in the playoffs, but they did lose to the eventual champion Miami Heat in the second round in 5. And they did have some new findings in that series that kind of turned the tide for them a little bit. And that was the rise of play in Jimmy Butler, who led the Bulls in scoring in that series with 15.6 points per game, and proved to be a great defender guarding LeBron James and Dwayne Wade throughout the series. It was a fun season, but they still missed their leader, and they were expecting to get him back in the 2013-14 season, and that was their hope for next season. Now, in the 2013-14 season, this was their year. They had high expectations, and Derrick Rose was back, and improved Jimmy Butler by his side, and obviously still the core of Joakim Noah, Taj Gibson, and Luol Deng. And they played pretty solid, but bad news hit again in the city of Chicago when Derrick Rose, after just coming back from torn ACL, missing a whole season, played 10 games in the 2013-14 season, 10 out of the first 11 games before tearing his meniscus and missing the rest of the season. And just like that, the title hopes for the Chicago Bulls disappeared and was once again set up for playoff disappointment. There were some positives though. Joakim Noah was a top 4 MVP candidate. He was one of those, he was a big man that actually kind of was a starter for one of these, passing big men that can kind of do it all. That's why he was an MVP candidate. He averaged about 11, 13, and like 5 or 6 assists for this team. Jimmy Butler's progress was also a career-high 13 points per game. That was a positive for the Bulls. And the Bulls won 48 games that season and finished 4th in the Eastern Conference, but lost once again in the first round to a young Washington Wizards team led by John Wall, and were now serious questions about the Chicago Bulls heading into the 14-15 season, because this team, the questions were remaining. Are they going to be able to win it all? Or was Tibbs the right coach? And the biggest question was, is Derrick Rose ever going to come back and be the same player he was pre-injury after 2 season-ending injuries in basically back-to-back seasons, you could say? I mean, he played 2011-12 playoffs, he got hurt, and then he comes back, plays 10 games, and he gets hurt once again. And throughout all this, the Chicago Bulls didn't really make any moves, no big moves to change the roster, but that all changed in the 2014-15 offseason, or the 2014 offseason. The Chicago Bulls made a major move at the time by acquiring Paul Gasol to play alongside Rose, Butler, and Joakim Noah. The Bulls also picked up EuroLeague star Nikola Mirotic and added depth to this team. But Derrick Rose had nagging injuries and rest days, and he played 51 games that season. He did give you 17 points per game, which wasn't bad, but clearly not the same freak athlete he was pre-injury. But probably the best thing that happened this season for the Bulls, I would say, is probably the all-star season of Jimmy Butler, his first taste of stardom in the NBA. Averaging 20 points per game, leading the team in scoring, was a top defender in the league as well. And then Pau Gasol, who had just came onto the team, played well. Instant impact, made the All-Star games alongside Jimmy Butler. And the Bulls won 50 games that season and were now in consideration, if they stayed healthy, for title contention, along with LeBron's new team in Cleveland and the 60-win Atlanta Hawks, who had 5 All-Stars. They won in the first round versus a young Bucks team in 6 games, and then they had a big matchup, and that was against LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers, who were missing Kevin Love. And this matchup was fun. Featured 2 all-time great playoff game winners, with Derrick Rose game-winning shot off the backboard for 3 in Game 3, and then LeBron answered with a game winner of his own in Game 4. The Bulls led the series actually 2-1 after Derrick Rose game winner, and it seemed Chicago had a chance, but after LeBron's game winner, things changed, and the Cavs won 3 in a row and knocked off the Chicago Bulls in 6 games, and it seemed this was their real best chance to try to win it all, but they didn't win it. And it seemed that this team can compete, but they kept losing. And then it finally started to set in, and it finally collapsed, and things changed. The Bulls going into the 15-16 season ran it back, but with a brand new head coach after they thought Tom Thibodeau was not the guy anymore. And they hired Fred Hoiberg. And in short summary, it failed miserably. We're not even going to talk about the 15-16 season. It failed miserably. They only won 42 games, missed the playoffs for the first time since the 2007-8 season. And now the questions were finally going to be answered in the following offseason. And in this offseason, the 2016 offseason is one of the more memorable offseasons for the Chicago Bulls in recent memory. And that was because they traded the hometown kid. Derrick Rose was gone. Traded him and traded fan favorite Joakim Noah to the New York Knicks, which now meant Jimmy Butler was the new face of the Chicago Bulls. Pau Gasol left to go play in San Antonio in hopes of a title. But the biggest moves for the Bulls were they thought they had a chance to win now, I guess. And they went out there and they acquired Chicago native, Hall of Famer, Heat legend, Dwayne Wade to play alongside Butler. And also picking up one of the smartest point guards ever in Rajon Rondo to have a 3 of Rondo, Wade, and Butler at point guard, shooting guard, and small forward. They drafted Michigan State star Denzel Valentine, and those were their major offseason moves. Those were solid moves at the time. I mean, some people didn't like them, some people did, but these were solid moves at the time for Chicago, especially after that 15-16 disappointment of a season. And in the 16-17 season, the Chicago Bulls, with lots of new faces, had a very up and down season. And it showed in their record, with them basically at one point being a pretty good team. Then they took a dip, and they finished the season at 41-41. It made sense. They ended up being the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. Jimmy Butler was a for sure all-star that season, averaged 24 points per game, had his real taste of almost like superstardom with those type of numbers he was putting up. Dwayne Wade didn't make the All-Star team for the first time since his rookie season, but he did give you solid production with 18 points per game. And they made it to the postseason and had a matchup with the 1 seed Boston Celtics, who were led by MVP candidate Isaiah Thomas, who in this season was the king of the fourth quarter. And he averaged 29 points per game, and the Celtics were a really well-rounded team. The Bulls, though, upset Boston at TD Garden in the first 2 games and were up 2-0 in that series heading back to Chicago, and it looked like Boston might get upset, but Rajon Rondo got hurt in Game 2, broke his hand, making him miss the remainder of the series, and after Game 2, the Bulls lost 4 in a row, and they lost in 6 games. And to this day, in my opinion, I believe if Rondo doesn't get hurt, as good as that Boston team was, Chicago probably wins that series because they won handily in those 2 games. At Boston, that's a tough environment to win. But they couldn't close it out without their leader. Rondo is a leader on the court, and it showed when he left or got hurt. And when Rondo went down, they had to start second-year point guard Jerrion Grant, who was in the Knicks trade for Derrick Rose, and things collapsed. So here we were. Once again, the Bulls made major moves, but this time it was in a different direction. The Bulls front office realized they couldn't win with this team. Jimmy Butler was not going to be the guy to win a title in Chicago, and they decided to hit the rebuild button, and these were the major moves. It was the blockbuster move of trading Jimmy Butler to Minnesota, who had just got Tom Thibodeau the year prior, and he was also the GM. So they traded him to Minnesota. Chicago shipped Butler out for the 7th pick in 2017 draft and drafted Arizona star big man Lauri Markkanen. They also traded for 2016 5th overall pick Chris Dunn, and they traded for the rising star Zach LaVine, who had made himself a name from his dunk contest victories already. And in a new situation, in the first year of a rebuild, you could say, the Bulls expectedly were a bad basketball team. They weren't that good. But all that really matters in rebuild years is player development, and in that aspect, it was a pretty okay year for them. Zach LaVine averaged 17 points per game, but only played 24 games due to injury. Rookie Lauri Markkanen was fun. He averaged 15 points per game and was first team all-rookie that season. And Chris Dunn had himself a nice little solid sophomore season, giving you 13 points per game, and also was one of the elite defensive guards in the league. They finished with 27 wins though, obviously missed the postseason, and this did give Chicago a lottery pick in the upcoming NBA draft to try to add on more young talent to this core. And in the 2018-19 season, in year 2 of the rebuild, it went absolutely terrible when it came to wins. And that ended Fred Hoiberg's time in Chicago quick. He got fired after a 5-19 start the following season, which led to a nightmare for Chicago fans. Jim Boylan, the assistant, took over. They had a 17-41 record after when he took over that season, and the Bulls finished with just 22 wins and 60 losses. As for young talent performances, it was another year of solid development. Zach LaVine became an official young star, averaged 24 points per game. Their first round pick in the draft, Wendell Carter, played decent, giving you 10 points per game with about 7 rebounds. And the picks from the Butler trade and Markkanen and Dunn were doing well. Markkanen rose in his production with 18 points per game after averaging 15 in his rookie year. Chris Dunn relatively stayed the same. And they did have other solid young players like Bobby Portis and Jabari Parker for half a season. But besides that, Chicago was a horrible basketball team, and it showed they were still in development. But a positive was they were in it for the infamous Zion Williamson sweepstakes in the 2019 draft lottery that could potentially alter the franchise. The offseason for Gar Forman and John Paxson didn't go exactly as they thought it would. The Bulls came in with the 4th best odds at the number 1 pick and dropped in the lottery 3 spots to the 7th pick in the draft, which was bad. They did draft Kobe White, who was a star in North Carolina, and he is a solid player now. I'm pretty sure they wish they had a Zion or John Morant. They did also draft Daniel Gafford, who's on Washington now. He's a solid big man as well. They acquired players like Luke Cornett, Tomas Satoransky, and Thaddeus Young also signed on board to be a mentor vet for the young players in Chicago. And this season right here, the 2019-20 season, was a breaking point between the players and coaching that caused serious disconnection within the team. Jim Boylan had lost the team because of the way he coached, the attitude that came with his style. Players had a problem with it, and it showed the way the team played. The Bulls won 22 games before the season stopped and had 43 losses already at that point. They didn't qualify for the bubble in Orlando, so their season was pretty much shut down early. The team was stuck in quicksand, it looked like, despite the development of LaVine, Kobe White, who was 2nd team all-rookie averaging 13 points per game, and Wendell Carter, who played similar to his rookie year in stat production. But a big reason why the Bulls dropped back, I would say, is Lauri Markkanen's drop in production. went from 18 points per game back down to 15, and it was on lesser efficiency than his 15 point per game rookie year. Then Chris Dunn, he completely fell off, averaging only 7 points, played 24 minutes per game compared to last season's 30 minutes per game as a starter. So he was now a bench guard and only has 7 points. The Bulls were in for an offseason of a few more questions to be answered and had another lottery pick to add another young piece. The Bulls in offseason move up during the draft lottery and get a top 4 pick in the 2020 draft. They also get themselves a new front office that changes the franchise, and they select Patrick Williams in this draft, who was not known by casual fans, but played well in Ohio State and was known for his elite defense and athleticism. They add him on to the same team basically from last season and hire a new head coach with Billy Donovan. That was their real only 2 major offseason moves that year. But in the 2020-2021 season last year, the Bulls were in a new play-in tournament conversation for majority of the season. Zach LaVine made his first All-Star game, averaging 27 points per game, a career high. One of the best leaders, or one of the league leaders in points per game that year. Kobe White had a jump in his stat line, averaging 15 points per game, and was the starting point guard for this team. Patrick Williams didn't wow anyone on the stat sheet, but he showed he can have serious impact on the game without dropping a lot of points. And Lauri Markkanen, though, his time in Chicago looked to be running out. He averaged double figures but was a major liability at times and eventually came off the bench. But this was the first official sign that Chicago was trying to win. They made a major trade deadline move for a longtime star in Nikola Vucevic on the Magic, who was having a career-high season, averaging 24.5 points per game with 12 rebounds on 40% three-point shooting. The Bulls also almost made a move for Lonzo Ball, who could have helped them big time last season at point guard, but didn't acquire him. Now, at the trade deadline, the Bulls were sitting at 19-24 and in position to potentially make the playoffs, so they felt they had a chance, so that's why they made the moves. But things didn't go as planned. They were a horrible defensive team, and Zach LaVine entered protocol in April, with the Bulls being in the last play-in spot at 10 at the time. But because of him missing those games, they dropped out of the play-in spot and missed the postseason once again, finishing in the 12th seed in the Eastern Conference. Now in the offseason, this one right here, this past summer, the Bulls finally made moves to become a competitor, a threat in the East with these moves. And this is a big reason why they're 16-8 through 24 games. The Bulls looked to add players around LaVine and Vucevic to compete in the weaker East, and did just that, acquiring Lonzo Ball, who was one of their targets, fit the young timeline, and has definitely helped Chicago this season big time. Along with fan favorite Alex Caruso, who's shown he's more than an athletic dunker, and he's shown the Bulls fans he's a hard worker, great defender, and a perfect fit in Chicago. But no move might be bigger in the whole offseason in the league than the Bulls signing DeMar DeRozan, who's become his former Raptors self and is right now an MVP candidate, the best player in the fourth quarter in the league. DeRozan is averaging 26 points per game along with LaVine, averaging the same, making them 2 of probably the top 5 or 6 scorers in the league this season. The Bulls are a top 10 defensive team and offensive team, and this team right now can compete with anybody in the league. They do have some question marks on their bench, even though I do think they got solid players like Caruso, rookie Ayo Dosunmu, and Kobe White. But I expect the Chicago Bulls to make maybe a trade during the deadline for bench scoring, so there isn't as much pressure on DeRozan and LaVine. But right now, Chicago basketball is back, and they are currently a top team in the Eastern Conference and in the NBA through 24 games. Anyways, that's going to do it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Link will be down in the description. This has been the Checkup, where we talk hoops and hoops only. And I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.